Elia's ward stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the glassy platform of the Zalarian capital. The city stretched above and around him, towers of translucent crystal shimmering in shades of silver and violet. Hovering vehicles moved silently between the spires, leaving trails of light that twisted like ribbons in the sky. Humans were rare here, and every pair of alien eyes seemed to follow him as he walked toward the palace. He adjusted the strap of his simple satchel, trying to calm the nervous tension in his chest. He had been trained for diplomacy, yes, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The heart of an empire that spanned dozens of star systems, ruled by an alien queen whose name alone inspired awe and fear, Seraphina. The palace gates opened with a hum, and Elias stepped into a vast hall. The floor beneath him was polished crystal, reflecting the light of floating orbs that glowed like captured stars. Alien nobles filled the room, standing in symmetrical lines. Many had multiple arms or shimmering, faceted eyes that seemed to read his thoughts. Their robes glittered with intricate patterns, and some wore small devices that whispered or blinked with unknown functions. Elias swallowed hard and forced himself to walk with steady, deliberate steps. The humans who had come before him had often been dismissed, laughed at, or ignored. He had to make a strong impression, and fast. A group of Zalarian officials approached. Their leader, a tall figure with 4 arms and iridescent blue skin, spoke in a language that Elias only partly understood. Fortunately, the translator implanted in his ear worked flawlessly. "Human," the leader said. "You are Elias Ward, ambassador of the Terran Federation. You come seeking peace, yet your kind has often been unpredictable. I am here to prevent conflict and to offer solutions that benefit both our peoples. Then let us find a path that combines cleverness with understanding." Queen Seraphina entered, her presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone present. She was taller than most of her court, with smooth silver skin that caught the light like flowing mercury. Her eyes, large and multifaceted, seemed to see not just the surface of things, but the intentions behind them. Elias froze for a fraction of a second, though he forced himself to step forward confidently. He had studied her image for weeks, memorized protocols, and rehearsed countless scenarios, but nothing could prepare him for the sheer force of her presence. The queen's voice, when she spoke, was calm but carried weight that echoed across the hall. "Elias Ward," she said, and the words resonated in his chest. "You come to my court as a representative of your species. Tell me, human, why should I listen to you?" "I am here to offer solutions, not threats." Elias listened as the Zalarians discussed territorial disputes, energy resources, and military plans. Their language was precise, logical, and full of nuances that humans often missed. He concentrated, carefully translating each subtle implication in his mind, trying to anticipate how he could respond. During the discussions, a junior noble approached him subtly, whispering through a translator device. "Human, they test you. Be careful. One wrong answer and they will consider you a threat." He had to act not only with knowledge but also with perception, understanding the hidden motives behind each question and observation. Hours passed. Elias answered questions, explained human technology, and offered alternative solutions to potential conflicts. His ideas were met with a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and thinly veiled amusement. He noticed several nobles exchanging small nods of approval, while others whispered warnings to one another. Finally, the queen intervened, her gaze fixed on him. "Elias Ward," she said, "you have survived the first day in my court. Many would have failed. You have shown patience, intelligence, and courage." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only wish to serve my people and find understanding between our worlds." Humans did not often receive such honors, especially not so early in a diplomatic mission. Elias felt the queen's warmth, though it was not the kind of warmth humans might expect. It was powerful and commanding, an unmistakable mark of respect and trust in Zalarian culture. He straightened, carefully respecting the gesture's protocol. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady despite the surprise, "I am honored." The mere fact that the queen had embraced a human was revolutionary, signaling a subtle but profound shift in the court's perception. Later, when the session ended, Elias was escorted to his quarters. He could still feel the weight of what had happened. The queen's gesture had saved him from the court's scorn, but it also marked him for attention. Some nobles would now be allies, impressed by his courage and ingenuity. Others might plot against him, feeling threatened by a human who could gain the queen's trust so easily. He entered a modest room overlooking the city, the towers glinting like jewels in the fading light. For the first time, he allowed himself to relax, though only slightly. He knew that tomorrow would bring more tests, more scrutiny, and more challenges. But for now, he had taken the first step. He had survived the Zalarian court and even earned the Queen's unusual respect. Elias walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling city. He thought about the stakes, the potential consequences of failure, and the opportunities that lay ahead. Humanity was not just a small species struggling for survival. They had ingenuity, courage, and the ability to adapt. In this alien court, those qualities could shine brighter than any weapon or technology. A soft chime announced a message from the palace administration. Elias opened it and read the holographic text projected before him, a reminder that the next day's council would include discussions of military plans that could directly threaten human colonies. He clenched his fist, determination hardening in his chest. "Then I will find a way to stop them," he whispered to himself. "Humanity will not be ignored, and I will not fail." Outside, the lights of the Zalarian capital flickered like stars brought to Earth, and somewhere in the towering palace, Queen Seraphina observed the court with her usual quiet authority, perhaps already considering how this human might shape the future of her empire and of the galaxy. The first day was over, but the real test had only just begun. The next morning, Elias woke to a quiet hum coming from the city outside his window. The crystalline towers glowed faintly in the pale light of the twin suns. Despite the calm, he knew that the palace was already stirring with intrigue. Today would be different. Today, he would see the court's true nature. He dressed simply, as protocol required, but made sure his uniform was pressed and clean. In the Zalarian court, appearance was as important as words. Every noble would notice the details, every gesture would be judged. Elias reminded himself to remain calm, to remain steady. As he walked through the marble corridors, he noticed small groups of aliens whispering in corners, their eyes flicking toward him as he passed. Some gave polite nods, others barely concealed suspicion. He knew that his survival yesterday and the Queen's embrace had shifted the court's balance. Allies were forming, but enemies were also plotting. Elias entered the council chamber, which seemed larger than the entire human embassy complex. The walls were lined with shifting holographic maps of the Empire's holdings, battle simulations, and trade routes. Floating platforms hovered above the floor, carrying senior officials who preferred to observe from height. Queen Seraphina entered silently, her long robes flowing like liquid metal. Her eyes met Elias briefly, and a small nod confirmed that she expected him to speak. Today, he would face a more serious challenge. A senior Zalarian noble, multiple arms folded, stepped forward. "Human," it said, voice smooth and deliberate, "you have been tested on diplomacy and patience, but courage is tested differently. You will now face the Council's assessment of strategy. You must advise us on a matter of military concern." But he had studied their records, analyzed their strategies, and he knew the human mind could offer insights no Zalarian had considered. He bowed slightly. "I will do my best, Your Majesty and Council members." A newly discovered resource-rich planet lay there, and the Council debated whether to secure it immediately using force or attempt a diplomatic approach with the local inhabitants. Elias studied the map, noting the Zalarian fleet placements, supply lines, and planetary defenses. "Your fleet is strong," he began carefully. "But occupying this world immediately could provoke resistance, and the human colonies nearby could be endangered. There is a way to secure the resources while minimizing conflict." "Speak plainly." "If humans can do it, I believe Xylarians can as well." "Human," she said finally, "you speak of caution and strategy, yet you do not command armies. How do you know this approach will work?" "It is not only about force, but understanding the situation fully before acting." The holographic maps shifted, showing a fleet moving unexpectedly near human-controlled space. One of the Xylarian commanders reported that the ships were likely scouting human colonies without authorization. A tense silence filled the room. Aliens whispered urgently, debating whether to confront the fleet aggressively or wait. Eyes flicked toward Elias as if expecting him to suggest a course of action. Elias studied the holographic display. The fleet's movements were erratic, possibly a test or reconnaissance. He calculated risks quickly, drawing on every bit of tactical knowledge he had learned. "Direct confrontation could escalate into war," he said, "but we can use information to our advantage. Let us communicate subtly, signal our presence without provoking attack, and monitor their actions closely. We can prevent missteps while gathering intelligence. Human, she said, you suggest caution and observation instead of immediate retaliation. Are you confident in this? Ilias listened, interjecting only when necessary, carefully explaining human reasoning that often focused on flexibility, intuition, and anticipating reactions, qualities the Zalarians respected intellectually but rarely practiced. By midday, a tentative agreement formed. The council would follow a cautious approach, observing the fleet while sending subtle signals to indicate they were aware. This compromise, guided by a human, was unheard of in Zalarian politics. Many nobles still looked at Ilias with suspicion, but a new sense of respect had begun to emerge. After the council, Ilias walked through the palace gardens, taking a moment to breathe. The gardens were unlike anything he had ever seen, with glowing plants and water flowing upward in streams suspended in the air. Despite the beauty, he could not shake the awareness that danger lurked in subtle ways. Not all nobles were pleased with his influence, and some might try to undermine him tomorrow. A junior official approached him. "Human," it said in a low voice, "you have survived the council, but know this, not all here welcome your ideas. Some will watch for mistakes. Some may even try to set traps. You have done well." He realized that his negotiations were not only about diplomacy, but about preventing a disaster that could affect countless lives. Later, he was summoned to a private audience with Queen Seraphina. Her chamber was vast and softly lit, filled with subtle scents and gentle colors that humans rarely experienced. She regarded him silently for a long moment, her eyes reflecting curiosity and consideration. "You handled the council with skill," she said finally. "Many expected you to falter, to reveal weaknesses that could be exploited, yet you navigated every challenge with composure and insight. How do you do this?" "We are adaptable. We learn quickly, and we rely on intelligence, reasoning, and cooperation. We cannot always match strength with strength, but we can find solutions where others see none. These are rare. Some now see your kind differently. That is the first step toward change." He would need to navigate allies and adversaries alike, and he had to do so with care, intelligence, and courage. Returning to his quarters, Ilias began preparing for the next day. He reviewed maps, analyzed fleet movements, and studied the political positions of every noble who had opposed him. Understanding their motivations, their fears, and their ambitions would be as crucial as any diplomatic speech. He paused to look out over the city once more. The twin suns had risen higher, casting long shadows over the crystalline towers. Somewhere in the palace, Queen Seraphina observed her court, considering the ripple effect of this human's actions. She had shown her favor, yes, but she also watched closely, knowing that true merit would be revealed only through trials and choices. Ilias took a deep breath. The court had begun to see humans not just as weak outsiders, but as beings capable of ingenuity, courage, and insight. He could feel the subtle shift in the balance of power. Some nobles would accept this, others would resist. And he would need every skill he had to survive and to succeed. He returned to his table, opening a data pad filled with intelligence reports, tactical simulations, and colony updates. He worked late into the night, planning, anticipating, and strategizing. Humanity had a chance to prove itself here, not through force, but through intelligence, empathy, and courage. And Ilias Ward would be at the center of it all. Tomorrow would be another test, another challenge. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet determination. He had survived the first real confrontation in the Xylarian court. He had earned the beginnings of respect. And he would not stop until humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. The morning sunlight reflected off the crystalline towers of the Xylarian capital, scattering rainbow-like patterns across the polished streets. Ilias Ward walked through the corridors of the palace, his satchel slung over one shoulder, mind racing with strategies and possibilities. The council would convene today again, and he sensed the tension in the air even before he entered the chamber. Some nobles still whispered behind his back, plotting to undermine the human who had dared win the queen's favor. As he entered the council chamber, the Xylarians were already gathered, their faceted eyes glinting with curiosity and suspicion. The holographic maps floated above the floor, showing fleet positions, planetary resources, and potential conflict zones. Queen Seraphina sat on her elevated platform, observing with that calm, piercing gaze that could seem to look right into one's intentions. A senior noble approached him, voice low but deliberate. Human, the Council awaits your analysis of recent fleet movements near the human colonies. You will address the potential risks and propose a course of action. Be precise. Errors will not be forgiven. His mind worked quickly, calculating probabilities, outcomes, and contingencies. Honored Council members, he began, voice steady and clear, the fleet movements near the Terran colonies are not yet aggressive. They appear to be reconnaissance, but their pattern suggests testing human response. Direct confrontation could escalate into conflict, yet ignoring the movement could signal weakness. Therefore, I recommend a phased observation approach. Humanity has survived by predicting reactions, adapting quickly, and minimizing unnecessary loss. We can gather information and prepare responses while avoiding unnecessary conflict. Strength is most effective when combined with knowledge and strategy. Some nobles exchanged glances, realizing that this human's perspective offered something they had overlooked. Queen Seraphina leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. "You speak well, human," she said, "but your analysis is theoretical. Are you confident that your approach will succeed where ours might act more decisively?" "Confidence comes from preparation, Your Majesty. We anticipate possibilities and adapt. Acting too quickly can provoke retaliation before understanding the full scope of the situation. Observation allows informed decisions." He noticed subtle gestures, hints of impatience, and hidden motives. His human intuition, combined with knowledge of diplomacy, allowed him to read patterns that even seasoned Xylarians overlooked. But the piece of reason was short-lived. A chime sounded, sharper and more urgent than before. The holographic map shifted suddenly, showing a fleet moving toward a nearby human colony with unusual speed. Panic rippled through the chamber, and several nobles shouted over one another, calling for immediate retaliation. Elias stepped forward. "Wait," he said firmly. "Immediate action without understanding the fleet's purpose could escalate into full conflict. Let us first determine if this is a genuine threat or a maneuver to provoke a response. I propose sending a small, unarmed signal craft to communicate our awareness and readiness while we gather intelligence. Human, you would risk the Empire's honor by sending only signals." Then Queen Seraphina spoke, her voice calm but authoritative. "We will follow the human's recommendation, signal the fleet and gather intelligence, observe and act only when necessary. Let us see if his logic holds." Elias could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but he remained composed. After the council session, he was escorted through a quieter corridor by a young aide. "Human," the aide said cautiously, "not all are pleased by your influence. Some will try to undermine you. Be vigilant." "I will be careful, but I will not step back from what is right. We learn their methods and prepare countermeasures. Humans survive by adapting. That is our advantage." He realized that his own survival depended not only on intelligence, but on understanding the ambitions and fears of every noble in the court. As evening approached, he returned to the gardens to gather his thoughts. The air was warm, filled with the scent of alien blossoms that shimmered in the fading light. The floating water streams reflected the last rays of the suns, creating prisms that danced across the crystal floors. It was beautiful, yes, but deceptive. Beauty here often masked danger. Elias sensed movement behind him. He turned just in time to see a figure dart behind a column. A junior noble, one whose loyalties were uncertain, had been watching him. Elias did not react immediately. He observed, analyzing the figure's posture, expression, and timing. Humans had developed survival instincts for subtle threats. Here, those instincts were as valuable as any weapon. The figure stepped forward cautiously. "Human," it said quietly, "be warned. Some in the council resent your growing influence. They may set traps. Watch your words carefully. Even the Queen's favor cannot protect you from every plot." The Xylarians were brilliant, but they were also predictable in their obsession with protocol, hierarchy, and honor. Humans, on the other hand, thrived in unpredictability and improvisation. He would use that advantage. The next morning, the test came swiftly. A formal session convened to discuss the unexpected fleet movement. Some nobles argued aggressively for immediate action, while others whispered doubts. One particularly powerful noble attempted to accuse Elias of being complicit, suggesting that the human ambassador might have signaled the fleet to test the Xylarian response. Elias remained calm. "Your accusation is without evidence," he said, voice firm. "The signal we sent was transparent, documented, and intended to prevent miscommunication. Any fleet movement was independent, and we have proof that it was reconnaissance, not coordinated with me." "Do you have evidence to support this claim?" she asked. The noble faltered. "None, Your Majesty." "I propose that we monitor the fleet closely and coordinate defensive measures without provocation. We ensure security and demonstrate restraint, a principle your empire has always valued. This approach preserves honor and minimizes risk." Ilias had not only prevented potential conflict, but had done so with strategy and calm authority, earning further respect in the process. By the day's end, Ilias walked alone through the palace gardens. The twin suns were low in the sky, casting long shadows. He thought about the subtle power of human ingenuity. Reasoning, observation, and courage could achieve what brute force alone could not. The queen had begun to see this, and the court was starting to recognize it too. Ilias understood, however, that this was only the beginning. The secret faction that resented his influence would not give up easily. He would need to remain alert, anticipate plots, and continue to demonstrate human excellence in every challenge. But for now, he allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. He had turned a potential disaster into a triumph, using the unique strengths of humanity, intelligence, patience, and courage. He had survived the council's tests once again, and his presence in the Zalarian court was beginning to be felt. As night fell, he looked up at the towering palace spires, their surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars. Somewhere inside, Queen Seraphina observed the court with her usual calm. Ilias knew she would be watching his next moves, judging not only his words but his character. And he was ready. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more tests, and likely attempts to undermine him, but Ilias' ward was prepared. Humanity had survived far greater odds, and now in this alien court they would prove that courage, ingenuity, and morality could shape the destiny of an empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The next morning, the palace corridors were alive with whispers. Nobles moved with purpose, eyes darting toward Ilias as he walked, his steps measured and calm. The previous days had already shifted the court's perception of humanity. Some saw him as a threat, others as an asset, and a few quietly admired his intellect and courage. Ilias entered the council chamber, which was brighter than usual. The sunlight refracted through the crystalline walls, creating a kaleidoscope of colors across the floor. The holographic maps hovered silently, displaying the positions of Zalarian fleets and resource allocations across dozens of systems. Today's session was not only about strategy, but also about appearances. How Ilias conducted himself now could influence the balance of power in the empire. Queen Seraphina entered with her usual grace, her presence commanding immediate attention. Her silver skin reflected the light, making her appear almost ethereal. The nobles bowed slightly, and the chamber fell into a hush. Ilias straightened his posture, meeting her gaze with steady determination. "Human," Seraphina said, her voice calm but powerful, "your council has prevented rash decisions, yet some members of my court remain unconvinced of your wisdom. Today, you will face their scrutiny directly. You will defend your actions and reasoning in full council, or risk losing the trust you have gained." He began, "Esteemed council members, my actions have always been guided by a single principle, to prevent unnecessary loss and maintain stability. Observation, careful planning, and strategic restraint are not signs of weakness. They are signs of understanding. My recommendations have preserved resources, protected lives, and maintained the empire's honor." Some nobles nodded subtly, others looked skeptical. One particularly tall noble with eyes like polished gems stepped forward. "Human, words are easy. How do we know your approach will succeed when faced with real danger? I anticipate not only the immediate effects but the long-term consequences. Acting with patience and insight allows success where rash action might fail." The council was beginning to realize that humans had qualities they often overlooked: intelligence, foresight, and moral clarity. Suddenly, the doors at the far end of the chamber opened, and a messenger entered with urgent news. The Zalarian fleet near the human colonies had encountered unexpected resistance from local factions. Minor skirmishes had broken out, but no major conflict had occurred. The situation could escalate if not handled carefully. Ilias studied the holographic displays, tracing fleet movements and local activity. "Your Majesty, council members," he began, "this is exactly why a measured approach is necessary. Immediate retaliation could escalate tensions and provoke full-scale conflict. We must coordinate a controlled response. combining diplomacy with precise, limited actions to stabilize the region. Finally, Serafina spoke. Human, you have demonstrated competence under pressure. Your recommendations are clear, reasoned, and so far effective, yet the Council requires assurance. Show them your judgment not with words but with action. I will do so, Your Majesty. As the plan unfolded, minor conflicts were contained, misunderstandings resolved, and local factions were engaged in dialogue. By the end of the day, the situation was stabilized. The Council watched in stunned silence. Where many had expected chaos, Elia's strategy had produced order and avoided unnecessary bloodshed. For the first time, the full extent of human capability became clear to the Zalarians. Intelligence combined with courage and adaptability could achieve results that brute force alone could not. The council members who had doubted him now regarded him with respect, and even some of the most skeptical nobles began to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Queen Serafina rose, her silver robes shimmering in the light. The chamber fell silent as she approached Elias. Without a word, she extended her arms and pulled him into an embrace. The court gasped. Nobles whispered in astonishment, some stepping back in surprise. No human had ever received such an honor in the history of the empire. The queen's embrace was a signal of trust, admiration, and recognition of unparalleled courage and skill. Elias felt the weight of the gesture. It was not warmth in the human sense, but it carried authority, respect, and acknowledgement. He remained calm, honoring the protocol of the Zalarian court, and bowed slightly within the embrace. Human, Serafina said softly, her multifaceted eyes fixed on him, you have demonstrated qualities that even I did not fully expect. Courage, intelligence, moral clarity, these are rare, and yet your kind possesses them in abundance. The Empire will take notice of your actions today. The chamber was silent, every noble processing what had just occurred. Some were shocked, others thoughtful. A few scowled, clearly resentful, but most were impressed. The human who had entered the court only days ago had just changed the perception of an entire species. Elias spoke carefully. Your Majesty, esteemed council members, my actions are not for personal honor. They are for understanding, for preventing conflict, and for demonstrating that humanity can be trusted as partners and allies. Our strength lies not in force alone, but in the ability to reason, to adapt, and to act with conscience. The Queen's embrace had shifted the balance, not only in Elias' favor, but also in the broader perception of humanity. Later, in his quarters, Elias reflected on the day's events. The court's perception had shifted dramatically. He had demonstrated that humans could match, and even surpass, the Zalarians in strategic thinking and moral reasoning. But he also knew that this newfound respect could spark jealousy, rivalry, and plots against him. A subtle knock at the door signaled a visitor. It was a young aide, someone who had observed Elias carefully and seemed inclined toward neutrality. Human, the aide said cautiously, today was remarkable. Few outsiders ever receive such recognition, and fewer still manage to prove themselves in the court. But be warned, there are those who will see this as a threat to their power. Your ability to remain calm and precise, even when the council questioned your judgment, it is remarkable. Many here underestimate humans, but today you proved that your species is more capable than we imagined. Humanity's place in this court, and perhaps in the galaxy, depends on every decision I make. She had recognized the potential in humans, and now the question remained. How far would she allow them to rise, and what challenges would they face next? Elias knew the answer was not simple. The court would continue to test him, to push, to challenge, and even to plot. But he also knew that humans possessed qualities the Zalarians had rarely appreciated: ingenuity, courage, moral clarity, and the ability to adapt in ways that no other species could. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new opportunities, and perhaps new threats. But Elias' ward was ready. The Queen's embrace had signaled a turning point, not just for him, but for all of humanity. In this alien court, humans were beginning to prove that their strength lay not in numbers or technology alone, but in the qualities that made them uniquely human. And as the night deepened over the shining city, Elias sat at his table, reviewing maps and strategies, preparing for whatever the council, or the universe, might throw at him next. He knew one thing with certainty. Humans had begun to leave their mark on the Zalarian Empire, and nothing could stop them now. The morning sun filtered through the crystalline towers of the Zalarian capital, casting a shimmering glow over the palace. Elias' ward moved through the corridors with a sense of purpose. his mind already calculating the challenges that awaited him. The council would convene once more today, and he knew this session could define the future of human influence in the empire. The court was already assembled when he entered. Nobles watched him intently, some with cautious respect, others with lingering skepticism. The memory of the queen's embrace from the previous day still lingered in their minds, and many whispered that humanity's presence had changed the court forever. Queen Seraphina sat on her elevated platform, her gaze sharp and measured. She spoke before anyone else, her voice resonating through the chamber. Today, we face decisions that will shape not only our empire but the balance of the galaxy. Human, you have proven your intellect and courage. The Council will now consider your recommendations on multiple matters of strategic importance. My goal is to ensure stability, prevent unnecessary conflict, and show that humans can be trusted as partners and allies. You must defend your ideas and demonstrate their effectiveness in full council. I propose solutions that balance diplomacy, strategic defense, and intelligence gathering. Several nobles murmured among themselves, some clearly impressed. Others exchanged skeptical glances, still uncertain if a human could fully understand the complexities of Zalarian strategy. Elias anticipated their doubts and addressed them directly. Respectfully, he continued, these recommendations are based on observation, analysis, and human experience. Humanity has survived in difficult conditions by adapting quickly, thinking creatively, and acting decisively when necessary. We do not rely solely on strength or tradition. We rely on insight, flexibility, and moral clarity. These qualities can benefit your empire just as they have protected ours. Then one of the nobles, its skin shimmering with shifting colors, spoke. Human, you claim to understand both sides, yet your species has little knowledge of our internal politics, our history, our customs. How can you be certain your approach will succeed? I respect your culture, your highnesses, and I rely on the universal principles of reason, integrity, and courage. These principles are not limited to humans. They are effective across species. What do you propose to unify them without causing further conflict? Let results speak louder than rhetoric. Reports indicated that a distant fleet of the Empire, previously thought inactive, had engaged in unauthorized maneuvers near human colonies. Tension rippled through the council. Some nobles called for immediate retaliation while others feared escalation. Elias stepped forward. Before any action is taken, let us verify the motives of the fleet. Acting on assumptions risks unnecessary conflict. I propose sending a discreet envoy to clarify intentions, while preparing defensive measures in case the situation escalates. This way, we protect both our colonies and the Empire's honor. We will follow the humans' recommendation. Observe, clarify, and prepare. Let wisdom, not impulse, guide our actions. By the end of the day, the Council had adopted his recommendations across multiple areas: diplomacy, defense, and resource management. The transformation in the court was remarkable. Nobles who had doubted him now consulted him quietly, seeking advice. Others, while hesitant, acknowledged that the human had a perspective worth considering. The Queen's embrace from previous sessions had already signaled approval, but now Elias' actions reinforced it. Humanity had begun to earn a permanent place in the Empire's deliberations. Later, Queen Seraphina summoned Elias to her private chamber. The room was vast, softly lit, and filled with subtle scents. The Queen regarded him carefully, her multifaceted eyes reflecting both curiosity and admiration. "Human," she said, "you have demonstrated that your species is capable of insight, courage, and moral clarity. The Council has begun to recognize these qualities. You have not only survived in my court, but have influenced it meaningfully. Tell me, what is your vision for humanity's role in the galaxy?" Humanity's strength lies in our intellect, courage, and conscience, and we hope these qualities can benefit all who are willing to work together. I am honored, Your Majesty. I will serve with dedication. Humanity would now have a permanent seat at the table in one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The potential for cooperation, understanding, and mutual growth was immense. Elias felt both pride and responsibility. In the following days, he began to work closely with the Council, coordinating strategies, facilitating diplomacy, and offering insights that bridged human and Zalarian perspectives. The court gradually adapted to the presence of a human among them. Some nobles resisted, still skeptical of humans, but even they could not deny the value of Elias' guidance. Human ingenuity and courage became apparent in subtle but powerful ways. He suggested innovations in resource management, improved communication methods, and strategies that combined human adaptability with Zalarian precision. Each success reinforced the idea that humanity's approach could complement, rather than challenge, the Empire's strength. Through all this, Queen Seraphina observed closely, occasionally offering guidance but allowing Elias to demonstrate his capabilities. The Queen's trust in him was both a shield and a challenge. Her favor had opened doors, but it also set high expectations. Every decision carried weight, and Elias embraced the responsibility. Weeks passed, and the Zalarian court began to acknowledge humanity in a way previously unimaginable. Humans were no longer seen as weak outsiders or minor players. Instead, they were recognized for their intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. The subtle influence of one human ambassador had shifted perceptions across an entire empire. Elias stood once again in the palace gardens, watching the twin suns set over the shimmering city. The floating water streams reflected the light, creating brilliant patterns across the crystal towers. He reflected on how far he had come, from a cautious diplomat stepping onto alien soil to a trusted advisor whose insight influenced decisions across the empire. He thought of the challenges that lay ahead. There would be new threats, unforeseen conflicts, and ongoing tests of humanity's abilities. But he also knew that humans had proven their worth, not through force or dominance, but through courage, intelligence, and integrity. A quiet knock at the chamber door interrupted his thoughts. The Queen's aide entered, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty requests your presence, human. You have changed the council, altered perceptions, and demonstrated that courage and intelligence can shape destiny. For this, the Empire is grateful. But with minds like yours, perhaps it can also be a place of cooperation and hope. Let your species continue to prove that humanity's strength is not only in survival, but in the courage to act wisely and the wisdom to guide others." Humanity had gained recognition, respect, and influence in a court that had once dismissed them. Their ingenuity, moral clarity, and courage had been tested and had triumphed. The Queen's trust had set the stage, but humanity had earned its place through action. He walked through the palace gardens one last time, reflecting on the journey. From the first moment he stepped onto Zalarian soil, humans had faced skepticism, underestimation, and danger. Yet, through courage, intelligence, and unwavering resolve, they had changed minds and hearts. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long reflections across the crystal towers. Elias knew that the future held more trials, but he also knew that humanity had proven something remarkable. That one species, when guided by courage, reason, and conscience, could leave a lasting mark on the galaxy. And as the stars began to shimmer above the capital, Elias felt a deep certainty. Humanity's place in the universe was no longer defined by doubt or limitation. It was defined by potential, achievement, and the unyielding spirit that had carried them across countless challenges. The Zalarian Empire and the galaxy would never forget that one human had changed everything.